The gate had not opened in 9,000 years. Zara Okafor reached its base at dawn on the 43rd day of the expedition, her breath fogging in the cold of a world that had no business being cold. Karath-Vel sat barely within its star's habitable band, and the ruins around her should have baked under a pale orange sky. Instead, the air carried a chill that the instruments couldn't fully account for, as if the stone itself was drawing warmth from the atmosphere and holding it somewhere inside. She set her equipment case down and looked up. The Karath-Vel was 80 meters tall. Not an arch in the conventional sense, more a proclamation carved from a single piece of basalt-black stone, its two uprights 3 meters thick at the base and tapering almost imperceptibly toward a lintel that bridged them at height. The surface was dense with glyph script, not decorative, not repetitive, but something the translation arrays had been working on for 6 weeks without producing a coherent reading. Every survey team before this one, 4 of them across 30 years, had noted the same thing. The Karath-Vel script was internally consistent but contextually opaque. The grammar existed. The meaning did not emerge. Commander Telek Ashran, the Velhari team lead, had given Zara 3 hours at the gate before the morning session. The expedition's primary objective lay beyond it, a chamber large enough to hold an archive, according to every orbital scan. What kind of archive and what it contained was the argument that had funded 4 expeditions and gotten this 5th one off the ground. No one had ever gotten the gate open, not with tools, not with harmonics, not with directed energy. The stone didn't yield. It stood the way old things stand, with the patience of something that has already outlasted everything that once threatened it. Zara crouched at the lower left panel of the right upright, where the glyph script ran in tightest concentration. She had been working this section for 2 weeks in stolen hours, not the grand upper registers that every survey photographer had catalogued, but the low band, the base course, where the characters were smallest and most worn. She had a theory about that band. Every constructed language embeds its key terms in its most referenced locations, not its most visible ones. 11 secondary inscription panels distributed across the inner ring all pointed back to the base course of the Karath-Vel. She had plotted them on her 3rd day here. She opened her case and took out the brushes. The sun, pale, orange-tinted, smaller than Earth's, had climbed 3 degrees by the time she heard Ashran's voice behind her. He was 40 meters back, arguing into his communicator about the schedule. The drilling team wanted to try the south face again. Ashran was explaining patiently that they had tried the south face twice, and the gate was not a door you drilled through. It was a door you understood, or you did not open it. Zara was not listening to either of them. She was listening to the script. Not literally, stone did not speak, but she had been working long enough with ancient written languages that the act of tracing characters felt, after a while, like attending to something. A grammar had a rhythm, a grammar with embedded phonemic notation, as she increasingly believed this one did had a sound. She had sketched the phonemic hypothesis in her field notes on day 29. The secondary inscription panels provided pronunciation guides, the kind that appear in scripts designed to be read aloud. The Karath-Vel was not a message to be silently decoded. It was a message to be spoken. She had told Ashran. He had listened carefully and told her they should run it past the xenolinguistics board before anyone attempted vocalization near a 9,000-year-old sealed structure. That had been 10 days ago. The board sat 4 transit days away on the relay station. They had not replied. Zara looked at the lower left panel. She had the full phonemic sequence mapped to 47 characters in the base course. She had it memorized. She said it aloud. Not loudly, barely above a murmur, the sound of someone reading carefully to themselves. The sequence ran 11 seconds. The sounds were strange in her throat, built for a vocal architecture different from a human larynx, but the phonemic guide had been designed to bridge exactly that gap. She was certain of that now, looking at the notation in the secondary panels. The guide was generous. It had been built for voices that were not the builder's own. The gate answered her. The vibration was the first thing, not sound exactly, but resonance, felt in the chest and the soles of her boots and the hand she had pressed flat against the stone to steady herself. Then the first glyph in the base course lit, a deep amber, the color of something very old and very warm. It lit from inside, not from the surface. As if the stone were not actually stone, but a shell around something that had been waiting for a particular frequency to pass through it. She stood up. Behind her she heard Ashran say, "What in then stop?" The amber light moved. It traced the phonemic sequence she had spoken character by character, in the order she had voiced them, 47 glyphs illuminating in sequence along the base course of the right upright. The light was slow, deliberate, as if confirming each syllable against some internal record. Okafor, Ashran's voice was very level. "What did you do?" "I read it," she said. Her voice was steadier than she had any right to expect. The 47th glyph lit, the sequence completed. For 3 seconds nothing happened, and Zara found herself calculating whether she had made an error in the 43rd character, which had been the hardest to map. A compound that the secondary panels gave 2 possible readings. The light spread. It left the base course and climbed, not at the deliberate character-by-character pace, but all at once, the way a wave crests, amber fire running up both uprights simultaneously, reaching the lintel, crossing it in a single continuous surge, and then, and this was the part she could not have prepared for, descending on the inner face of the gate, the face that pointed toward whatever lay beyond. The inner face was different from the outer. She had not seen it clearly before. The gate stood in a frame of collapsed inner-ring wall that made the far side difficult to reach, and the survey photographs taken by drone were flat, unlit. What the amber light revealed now was a surface carved with a single image, not script. A figure, humanoid, standing, with arms slightly raised at the sides in a posture that every xenoarchaeologist recognized as a greeting gesture across a dozen recovered alien cultures. Behind the figure, radiating outward, were lines that Zara knew instantly. Orbital lines, planetary orbits, and one of those orbits, the third from the center, at a distance, and with a planetary mass that she could read by proportion even at this scale, belonged to Earth. The ground shook. Not an earthquake, a mechanism, something below and inside the gate engaging after 9,000 years of stillness. Ashran was shouting for everyone to fall back, and she heard boots on the stone-flagged approach, and then the creak and groan of mass moving that had not moved in longer than human civilization had existed. The gate was not swinging open like a door. The base of each upright was descending into recesses in the foundation that no survey had detected. The stone was sinking, very slowly, pulling down and into the ground, the way a portcullis drops in reverse, and as it dropped the gap at the top of the arch widened, letting in the orange sky. Okafor, that was Tessiv the medic, grabbing her arm. "We need distance." "It's not dangerous." She did not know why she said it. She said it the way you say something you have known for longer than you can account for. The gate continued to descend. 30 seconds, a minute. It moved with perfect, terrible patience, and as the top of the arch cleared the lintel gap and the stone sank below the level of the foundation, the space beyond it was finally fully visible. The chamber was not what the scans had implied. The scans had shown a large enclosed space, which was true. What they had not shown, because no instrument carried by any of the previous expeditions had been sensitive to this, was that the chamber was lit. It had been lit for 9,000 years, apparently, by a bioluminescent medium, not a chemical lamp, but something grown into the chamber walls, still alive, still functioning, producing a low blue-white light that fell on a room that was not an archive. It was a greeting hall. Long, wide, with a floor of polished dark stone and 2 rows of standing structures that Zara needed 3 full seconds to identify as pedestals. Display platforms for objects that, from this distance, appeared to be documentation. Tablets, codices, folded records, things preserved under the same bioluminescent care that lit the ceiling. At the far end, visible at this distance only as a shape in the blue-white glow, was a structure she could not categorize yet. The gate's descent finished. The foundation accepted the stone. The entryway stood clear. Zara became aware that she was the only member of the expedition still standing on the approach path. Everyone else had retreated to the perimeter. Ashran was back. Tessev was at his shoulder. The rest of the team, 11 beings from 5 species, stood in a rough half-circle at a distance of 30 meters, and none of them were moving. She looked back at them. Ashran met her eyes. He had led 4 expeditions to dead worlds in his career, and he was not a man who flinched easily, and he was flinching now not from fear of the gate itself, she thought, but from the shape of what had just happened, from the question of why. She turned back to the open gate. The structure at the far end of the greeting hall had become clearer as her eyes adjusted to the bioluminescent light. A plinth, roughly 2 meters tall, with a carved horizontal surface at the top and something resting on that surface. An object the size of a human palm. She could not see its shape at this distance. She walked in. The air inside was warmer than outside and carried a scent she had no name for, not decay, not must, but something almost organic, as if the room had been breathing in a slow cycle for 9,000 years. She walked the length of the hall without touching the pedestals, eyes on the plinth. The object on it was a disc. Thin, flat, dark in color but surfaced with the same glyph script as the gate's outer face, except here the script was finer, the characters smaller, arranged in a spiral from center to edge. She did not touch it. She stood in front of the plinth and looked at it and let her eyes move from the center outward along the spiral, reading. She had the phonemic system now. Reading it was not the same as understanding every word, but the shape was legible, a greeting, a record of purpose, a list of conditions, and at the spiral's outer edge, the statement that served as the document's title. She could read the title. It said, "For the first daughter who opens the gate." Her throat was dry. She stood very still and thought about the orbital lines carved on the inner face of the gate, and the phonemic guide built into the secondary inscription panels, built carefully, built to accommodate a larynx that was not the builder's. She thought about the 3rd orbital from the center. The bioluminescent light in the chamber pulsed once, a single slow deepening, like a breath held and released, and the plinth at the center of the ceiling glowed for a moment with a deeper amber, matching the color of the gate's activation sequence. Then a voice filled the room. Not loud, not overwhelming, a recorded voice or the preserved vibration of one produced by whatever mechanism lived inside the plinth and had waited for exactly this. It spoke in the phonemic register she had mapped. She understood it. It said, "Step through, first daughter." 4 words, 5 if you counted the address, spoken with the cadence of a formal welcome, not a command, not a plea, but an acknowledgement of an arrival that had always been expected. Zara Okafor stood in the greeting hall of a civilization that had died 9,000 years before her species learned to write, and breathed the air they had left breathable, and stood in the light they had left burning, and understood that the gate had not been a mystery awaiting the right tool. It had been a letter awaiting its reader. The builders had met someone, somewhere, long enough ago that the memory of it did not survive in any human record, and they had thought highly enough of that meeting to build this. A door that only opened for a particular voice, a room prepared for a particular arrival. She reached out and picked up the disc. It was lighter than it looked. She turned it over once, looking at the spiral of script on both faces. Then she walked back to the entrance, out through the gap where the gate had stood and into the orange morning. Ashran was the first to reach her. He said nothing. He looked at the disk in her hands and then at her face, and then back at the open gate behind her. The expedition medic Tessev said quietly, "What's in there?" Zara looked at the disk for a moment. Then she looked at the hall behind her, the bioluminescent glow, the 2 rows of pedestals and their 9,000-year cargo, the plinth still lit with amber in the blue-white dark. "A greeting," she said, "and everything they wanted to tell us." She had been in xenolinguistics long enough to know that the work of the next decade had just been handed to her in 2 cupped hands, carved in a spiral on a disk the size of her palm. She had been human long enough to know that the weight of that was not something she would feel until much later, when the orange sky over Karath-Vel had given way to the transit ship's stars, and the ruins were far behind her, and the quiet of the journey gave her time to sit with the fact of what the builders had done. They had not sealed the gate against the future. They had sealed it for a specific future, for the day when the people they had met, long ago and far from here, would finally grow capable of reaching it. They had built a door and lit a room and left a record and waited, with the patience of stone and preserved light, for the voice that would come. It had come. It had taken 9,000 years. She walked toward the survey camp with the disk in her hands, and the gate stood open behind her, and the light inside it did not go out.